Alrighty, welcome back to another thrilling installment of Wordy Wednesdays. I'm your intrepid narrator, Fraggeth, and today we are continuing on with our journey through Downbelow Station by C.J. Cherryh. A shortish one this week, um, mostly because the chapter that would be towards the end of it is like the solid sixth to an eighth of the book. It's pretty lengthy. It's at least 10% of the book's run. It would in fact be its own stream, and might have to be depending on how next week goes. We'll find out. With any luck, I'll be able to get through that. Um, I apologize for nothing on Monday. My schedule prevented it. So yeah, we go into book 5, part 5. A bunch has happened. The status quo as things stand. Um, the Mazian Fleet still holds Pell, despite the Union attempted incursion, which failed. Union did not expect to be beaten back the way they were. Um, they did not expect the losses they received, so they're a little bit shell shocked. So they use Lukas's son Vittorio, who they have as a hostage. Um, and Vittorio's like, you know, whatever, man. My father doesn't care that I'm here. I could be killed, he wouldn't care. So like, I'll do whatever, but I can't make promises but I can't promise you I'm going to have any kind of effective impact. Um, so he's pretty much on team neutrality at this point. He'll do whatever. He doesn't really care for his father's schemes and plans, but at the same time he's in a bind. Um, uh, I think it's sort of implied that Dain Jacoby, who was sent out there, is kind of in the same position. Pretty much everyone who's left Pell uh, to do their own thing is kind of in that position. Seagust Heirs is kind of in that position where it's like, well, um, I thought I had bargaining power. Earth thought it had bargaining power. It does not. It has nothing that Union wants or needs. Um, Union is willing to deal, but like entirely on their terms, uh, and they will do whatever they want anyway. To be honest, uh, so the Mazian fleet pulls back in to Pell Station, and Mazian knows that Lukas has been playing games. John Lukas has been double teaming them, or double two timing them, whatever, two timing them, which is very different than double teaming. Has been two timing them with a Union agent. Um, he learns this through Mr. Hale, who was formerly one of Lukas's goons. Mooks, whatever the proper hired muscle term is that we're allowed to use now, and uh, I like either one. Um, anyway, Brad Hale, something like that. So Mazian knows that his son is out with Union. Um, Bran or Brad? Oh, here we go. Bran Hale. Sounds like a delicious, delicious part of a good breakfast to move things along in one's innards. Anyway, Mazian knows that Lukas is a traitor, or out for himself anyway, and basically throws him to Hale and his men to get the absolute bejesus kicked out of him and or killed. It's not clear, and I can't remember. Um, let's see, what else is going on? The status quo for Damon, Konstantin, and Josh Talley is that they're hiding. Um, they're kind of our view into what the situation on the ground inside for most of the populace is inside of Pell Station, which is to say, not great, because they're there's food lines and they're forced into a general imprisonment and constant watch by guards. So it's kind of an awkward position to be in. But the Downers, the Hisa, have noticed Damon and are like, "Hey, we are your mom's alive. We are working with your mom. If you want, we can smuggle you to her." And he's like, "I don't want anyone getting hurt on my account. That would not do me any good. Um, so not now. Pretend you've never noticed me." Um, that's kind of it for them. The biggest development was how Emilio Konstantin and Milico and really everyone there basically said, "You know what? We're not hanging out here at the main Downbelow base, and we're going off into the woods." Um, because whoever wins up there, Union or the Mazian Fleet, we lose. And we have a good thing going here. We're doing our best to treat the Hisa well, um, and frankly, we want to preserve the planet as best we can. Union doesn't appear to have any interest in doing that, and the Mazian Fleet certainly doesn't because they need the resources from there entirely too much. Um, so they've gone off and now been led away to a Hisa sacred location of sorts. It's got this big statue monument thing, artwork, sculpture, and they talk to the Hisa elders, and the Hisa elders are like, "Stay here. We'll dream the bad people away." And Damon is like, or not Damon, Emilio is like, "That's great, but if they come here, it could get very ugly." Um, they come there. Porey, I don't think Porey himself lands, but certainly representatives from the Africa land with a dropship and troops and guns, and are like, "Hey, you thought you'd be cute if you dipped. We're not taking kindly to that. Go back to your assigned workplaces or be shot." And Emilio is like, "Well, me and a crew of all the people you actually need to run things and make the resources that you need will go, but nobody else does. You leave these people alone, or we will not work for you, and you will have to kill all of us. And then what will you do? You need us more than we need you, by a lot. Um, so the threats will only go so far." But he, Emilio, and a number of other people, I think it's like 60 something people, agree. Uh, Double check here. It doesn't really matter, but it's like 60 something people, I think. Agree, okay, we'll go and do this. We can handle it. But uh, everybody else is pretty much a hostage at this point. So from here, I guess we get to move on. Do I get to use one of my other book covers? I've got a lot of book covers. I've got a couple book covers I might not actually get to. So for the last stream, I'll probably have to set up a, what do you call it, slideshow of some of the remaining cover art that I have. Would it be too distracting if I set up, because I have like a folders of like 10 covers at any given time or so, depending on the book. Would people find it distracting if I just had those all set as a slideshow? One of the main reasons I don't do it, particularly for stuff like Hyperion, was because those covers contained significant spoilers. So I tried to curate accordingly. But if would that be distracting for people for there to be a slideshow? I would hope that it wouldn't be for me. One of the other practical upshots of having it be a single image is I can look at the videos or the streams, the files or whatever, on YouTube and know immediately, oh, I've used this one. I know how many I've done. I know that I've used this. I know that that plot point occurred. That's a rare situation. That doesn't happen too often. Um, but feedback on that is appreciated. Anyway, without further ado, or maybe there will be some further ado, who knows? Let's get to the next part of Downbelow Station. Book 5, Chapter 1. Pell, Blue Dock, aboard ECS-1, Europe. November 29th, 2352. Signy leaned back in her chair at Europe's council table, shut her eyes a moment, propped her feet in the seat of the chair next to her. The peace was short-lived. Tom Edger showed up, with Edo Porey, and they took their places at the table. She opened one eye and then the other, arms still folded across her middle. Edger had sat down at her back, Porey in the seat one removed from her feet. She yielded wearily to courtesies, swung her feet to the floor, and leaned against the table, staring dully at the far wall, out of sorts for conversation. Kur came in and sat down, and Mika Kreshov came at his heels, took the seat between her and Porey. Sung's Pacific was still out on patrol, with the unfortunate rider captains of all the ships deployed under his command in perpetual duty, docking in shifts to change crews. They would not let down their guard, however long the siege became. There had been no word of the Union ships they knew were out there. There was one ship, a moat called Hammer, a merchanter they were sure was no merchanter at all, which hung at the edge of the system, broadcasting propaganda. And a long hauler that it was, it could jump faster than they could get a ship within striking range of it. A spotter. They knew it. There might be another, a ship named Swan's Eye, a merchanter like Hammer, which did no merchanting at all, and another whose name they did not know, a ghost that kept showing up on long scan and drifting out again, that might well be a Union warship, or more than one of them. The short haulers who remained in the system kept the mines going, stayed far from Pell and far from what was going on about the rim, desperate merchanters pursuing their own concerns without acknowledging the whole grim business, the absence of the long haulers, the fleet ghosting about the system rim, the spotter ships that kept an eye on them, the whole situation. So did the station, attempting normalcy in some of its sections, with on-duty troopers and libertied troops moving among them. Fleet Command had to give the liberties. There was no keeping troops or crew pent up for months at dock within arm's reach of the luxuries of Pell when the living space on the carriers was Spartan and crowded during prolonged dock. And that had its peculiar difficulties. Mazian came in, immaculate as usual, sat down, spread papers before him on the table, looked about him, lingered last and longest on Signy. "Captain Mallory, I think your report had best come first." She reached unhurriedly for the papers in front of her, stood up at her place, that being her option. On November 28th, 2352, at 23:14 hours, I entered number 0878 Blue of this station, a residential number in a restricted section, acting on a rumor which had reached my desk, having in company my troop commander, Major Dyson Jans, and 20 armed troops from my command. I there discovered Trooper Lieutenant Benjamin Goforth, Trooper Sergeant Bila Mysos, both of Europe, and 14 other individuals of the troops in occupancy of this 4-room apartment. There were drugs in evidence, and liquor. The troops and officers in the apartment verbally protested our entry and our intervention, but Privates Mila Urton and Thomas Sentia were intoxicated to such an extent that they were incapable of recognizing authority. I ordered a search of the premises, during which were discovered 4 other individuals, male aged 24, male aged 31, male aged 29, female aged 19, civilians, in a state of undress and showing marks of burns and other abuses, locked in a room. In a second room were crates which contained liquor and medicines taken from the station pharmacy, and so labeled, along with a box containing 113 items of jewelry, and another containing 158 sets of Pell civilian IDs and credit cards. There was also a written record, which I have appended to the report, listing items of value, and 52 crew and troops of the fleet, other than those present on the premises, with certain items of value by the names. I confronted Lieutenant Benjamin Goforth with these findings and asked for his explanation of the circumstances. His words were, "If you want a cut, there's no need for this commotion. What share will it take to satisfy you?" Myself, Mr. Goforth, you're under arrest. You and your associates will be turned over to your captains for punishment. A tape is being made and will be used in prosecution. Lieutenant Goforth, bloody bitch, bloody bastard bitch. Name your share. At this point, I ceased argument with Lieutenant Goforth and shot him in the belly. The tape will show that complaint from his companions ceased at the same moment. My troops arrested them without further incident and returned them to the carrier Europe, where they remain in custody. Lieutenant Goforth died on the premises after giving a detailed confession, which is appended. I ordered items in the apartment delivered to Europe, which has been done. I ordered the Pell civilians released after intensive identification procedures, with a strong warning that they would be arrested if any details of this matter became public knowledge. I returned the apartment to station files after it was completely cleared. End of report. Appendices follow. Oh, I should have used my other cover. Let me put that on. Oh, shoot. I don't remember which it is. I think it's this one. No, that's not it. That's not it. That's not it. Is it you? That's it. There we go. I don't think I used this one yet. I used one similar to it, though. Mazian had not ceased to frown. To your observation, was Lieutenant Goforth intoxicated? To my observation, he had been drinking. He waved his hand slightly, an indication for her to sit down. She did so, leaned back with a scowl on her face. You neglect to account for your specific reason for this execution. I'd prefer it stated for clarity's sake. It was refusal to acknowledge an arrest not only by a troop major, but by a captain of the fleet. His action was public. My answer was equally so. Mazian nodded slowly, still grim. I valued Lieutenant Goforth, and in the normal practice of the fleet, Captain Mallory, there is a certain understanding that troops are not subject to the stricter disciplines of crew. This execution, Captain, places a severe burden on other captains now called upon to follow up this extreme penalty with decisions of their own. You force them to support your harshness against their own troops and crew, or to disagree openly by dismissing troops with the reprimand that such activities would normally merit, and thereby seem lax. The issue, sir, is a refusal of an order. So noted, and that will be the complaint lodged. Those troops determined in court-martial to have participated in that refusal will be dealt with by severest penalties. Bystanders will be faced with lesser charges and dismissed. Charges of willful and knowledgeable breach of security in contributing to a hazardous situation. I'm making progress with the new card systems, sir, but the old ones are still valid in major areas of the station, and the personnel in that apartment were directly engaged in black market traffic in IDs to the detriment of my operations. The others murmured protests, and Mazian's frown grew darker. You were faced with an immediate situation that may have had no other answer than the one you gave. But I would point out to you, Captain Mallory, that there are other interpretations that affect morale in this fleet. The fact that there were no Norway personnel arrested, and none on the infamous list. It could be pointed out that this was a case of a rumor deliberately leaked to you by some rival interest among your own troops. There were no Norway personnel involved. You were operating outside the province of your own administration. Internal security is Captain Q's operation. Why was he not advised before this raid? Because India troops were involved. She looked directly at Q's frowning face, and at the others, and back at Mazian. It did not look to be a major operation. Yet your own troops escaped the net. Were not involved, sir. There was stark silence for a moment. You're rather righteous, aren't you? She leaned forward, arms on the table, and gave Mazian stare for stare. I don't permit my troops to sleep over on station, and I keep strict account of their whereabouts. I knew where they were, and there are no Norway personnel involved in the market. While I'm being called to account, I'd also like to make a point. I disapproved of the general liberties when they were first proposed, and I'd like to see the policy reviewed. Disciplined troops are overworked on the one hand and over-libertied on the other. Stand them till they're falling down and tired, and liberty them till they're falling down drunk. That's the present policy, which I have not permitted among my own personnel. Watches are relieved at reasonable hours, and liberties are confined to that narrow stretch of dock under direct observation of my own officers for the very brief time they're allowed at all. And Norway personnel were not involved in this situation. Mazian glared. She watched the steady flare of his nostrils. We go back a long way, Mallory. You've always been a bloody-handed tyrant. That's the name you've gotten. You know that. That's quite possible. Shot some of your own troops at Eridu. Ordered one unit to open fire on another. Norway has its standards. Mazian sucked in a breath. So do other ships, Captain. Your policies may work on Norway, but our separate commands make different demands. Working independently is something we excel at. We've done it too long. Now I have the responsibility of welding the fleet back together and making it work. I have the kind of independent bloody-mindedness that hung Tibet and North Pole out there instead of moving in, as sense should have told them. 2 ships dead, Mallory. Now you've handed me a situation where one ship holds itself distinct from others and then pulls an independent raid on an admittedly illicit activity involving every other crew in the fleet. That's some talk. There's some talk that there was a second page to that list. Do you know that? That it was destroyed. This is a morale problem. Do you appreciate that? I perceive the problem. I regret it. I deny that there was a destroyed page, and I resent the implication that my troops were motivated by jealousy in reporting this situation. It casts them in a light I refuse to accept. Norway troops will follow the same schedule hereafter as the rest of the fleet. She sat back. I find a policy which gives us mutiny, and now I'm ordered to imitate it. The destructive thing at work in this company, Mallory, is not the small amount of black marketing that's bound to go on, that realistically goes on every time we have troops off ship, but the assumption of one officer and one ship that it can do as it pleases and act in rivalry to other ships. Divisiveness. We can't afford it, Mallory, and I refuse to tolerate it under any name. There's one commander over this fleet. Or are you setting yourself up as the opposition party? I accept the order, she muttered. Mazian's pride, Mazian's ever so sensitive pride. They had come to the line that was not to be crossed when his eyes took on that look. She felt sick at her stomach, boiling with the urge to break something. She settled quietly back into her chair. The morale problem does exist, Mazian went on, easier, himself settling back with one of those loose, theatrical gestures he used to dismiss what he had determined not to argue. It's unfair to lay it to Norway alone. Forgive me. I realize you're a good deal right. But we're all laboring under a difficult situation. Union is out there. We know it. Pell knows it. Certainly the troops know it, and they don't know all that we know, and it eats at their nerves. They take their pleasures as they can. They see a less than optimum situation on the station, shortages, a rampant black market, civilian hostility most of all. They're not in touch with operations we're taking to remedy the situation. And even if they were, there's still the Union fleet sitting out there waiting its moment to attack. There's a known Union spotter out there we can't do anything about. Not even the normalcy of dock traffic on this station. We're beginning to go for each other's throats. And isn't that precisely what Union hopes for? That just by keeping us here without exit, we'll rot away? They don't want to meet us in open conflict. That's expensive, even if they push us out. And they don't want to take the chance of us scattering and returning to a guerrilla operation. Because there's Cytine, isn't there? There's their capital, all too valuable if one of us decides to hit it at cost. They know what they've got on their hands if we slip out of here. So they sit. They keep us uncertain. They hope we'll stay here in false hope, and they offer us just tranquility enough to make it worth our while not to budge. They gamble. Probably they're gathering forces now that they know where we are. And they're right. We need the rest and the refuge. It's the worst thing for the troops, but how else do we manage? We have a problem. And I propose to give our erring troops a taste of trouble, something to wake them up and persuade them there's still action at hand. We're going after some of the supplies Pell is short on. The short haulers, staying so carefully out of the way, can't run far or fast. And the mines have other items, the supplies supporting them. We're going to send a second carrier out on patrol. After what happened to North Pole, Kresov muttered. With due caution. We keep all the station-side carriers at ready, and we don't stray too far from cover. There's a course which can put a carrier near the mines and not take it far out of shelter. Kresov, with your admirable sense of caution, let that be your task. Get the supplies we need and teach a few lessons if necessary. A little aggressive action on our part will satisfy the troops and improve morale. Signy bit her lip, gnawed at it, finally leaned forward. I volunteer for that one. Let Kresov sit it out. No, Mazian said, and quickly held up a pacifying hand. Not with any disparagement, far from it. Your work here is vital, and you're doing an excellent job at it. Atlantic makes the patrol, herds a few haulers into line, and restores station traffic. Blow one if you have to, Mika. You... There was general laughter. Signy stayed sour. Captain Mallory, Mazian said, you seem discontent. Shootings depress me, she said cynically. So does piracy. Another policy debate. Before taking on any large-scale operations of that kind, I'd like to see some effort toward conscripting the short haulers, not blowing them. They stood with us against Union. Couldn't get out of the way. There's a far difference, Mallory. That should be remembered. Which of them were out there with us? Those ships should be approached differently. Mazian was not in a mood for listening to her reasons. Not today. He had a high flush in his cheeks, and his eyes were dark. Let me get through the orders, old friend. That's taken into consideration. Any merchanter in that category will obtain special privileges when docked at station, and we presume any merchanter in that category will not be among those out there refusing our orders to move in. She nodded, carefully erased the resentment from her face. There was danger in upstaging Mazian. He had enormous vanity. He had an enormous vanity. It overbalanced his better qualities on occasion. He would do what was sensible. He always had. But sometimes the anger lingered. Long.
I'd like to point out,
Porey's deep voice interjected.
contrary to Captain Mallory's expectations of local help, we have a problem case in the Downbelow operation. Emilio Konstantin snaps his fingers and gets what he wants out of his workers down there. It gets us the supplies we need and we put up with it. But he's waiting. He's just waiting. And he knows right now he's a necessity. If we get those short haulers involved at station, we've got other potential Constantine types, only they'll be up here with us, berthed right beside our ships.
They're not likely to jeopardize Pearl, Q said.
And what if one of them is Unionist? We know well enough that they've infiltrated the merchanters.
It's a point worth considering, Mazian said. I've thought about it, which is one reason, Captain Mallory, why I'm reluctant to take strong steps to recruit these haulers. There are potential problems, but we need the supplies, and some of them aren't available elsewhere. We put up with what we have to. So we make an example, Kreshoff said. Shoot the bastard. He's trouble waiting to happen.
Right now, Porey said slowly, Constantin and his crew work 18 hours a day. Efficient work, quick, skilled, and smooth. We don't get that by other methods. He gets dealt with when it's workable without him.
Does he know that?
Porey shrugged. I'll tell you the hold we've got on Mr. Emilio Konstantin. Got ourselves a site with a lot of downers and the rest of the human inhabitants, all in one place, all one target, and he knows it.
Mazian nodded. Constantin's a minimal problem. We have worse worries, and that's the second matter on the table. If we can forbear another raid on our own troops, I'd rather concentrate on the whereabouts of station-side subversives and fugitive staff. Signy's face heated. She kept her voice calm. The new system is moving into full use as quickly as possible. Mr. Lukas is cooperating. We've identified and carded 14,947 individuals as of this morning. That's with a completely new card system and new individual codes with voice locks on some facilities. I'd like better, but Pell units aren't designed for it. If they had been, we wouldn't have had this security problem in the first place. And the chances you may have carded this Jasad person? No. No reasonable likelihood. Most or all of our fugitives are moving into the uncarded areas where their stolen cards still work. For the time being. We'll find them. We've got a sketch of Jasad and actual photos of the others. I estimate another week or two to begin the final push. But all the operations areas are secure. All the operations areas are secure. The security arrangements for Pell Central are laughable. I've made recommendations for construction there. Mazian nodded. When we get workers off damage repair. Personnel security? The notable exception is the Downer presence in the sealed area of Blue 1-4. Constantin's widow, Lukas's sister. She's a hopeless invalid, and the Downers are cooperative in anything while it assures her welfare. That's a gap, Mazian said. I've got a comm link to her. She cooperates fully in dispatching downers to necessary areas. Right now, she's of some use, as her brother is. While both are, Mazian said. Same condition. There were details, stats, tedious matters which could have been traded back and forth by comp. Signy endured it grim-faced, nursing a headache and a blood pressure that distended the veins in her hands, while she made meticulous notes and contributed stats of her own. Food, water, machine parts. If they were taking on a full load, every ship fit to run again if it came to that. Repairing major damage and going ahead with minor repairs had been long postponed in the operation leading up to the push. Total refitting while keeping the fleet as mobile as possible. Supply was the overwhelming difficulty. Week by week, the hope that the more daring of the long haulers would come venturing in diminished. They were 7 carriers, holding a station and a world, but with only short haulers to supply them, with their only source of some machined items. The supplies those very haulers had aboard for their own use. They were pent in, under siege, without merchanters to aid them, the long haulers who had freely come and gone during the worst of the war. Could not now hope to reach the hinder star stations, of which there was precious little remaining, mothballed, stripped, some probably gone unstable, a long, long time without regulation. Warships alone could not do the heavy cross-jump hauling Oh, geez. Warships alone could not do the heavy cross-jump hauling major construct. Okay, I see what I did wrong. Warships alone could not do the heavy cross-jump hauling major construction required. Without the long-haul merchanters, Pell was the only working station left them, but Saul itself. Unwelcome thoughts occurred to her as she sat there, as they had been occurring regularly since the Pell operations began to go sour. She looked up from time to time at Mazian, at Tom Edger's thin, preoccupied face. Edger's Australia partnered with Europe more often than any other. An old, old team. Edger was second in seniority as she was third, but there was a vast gulf between second and third. Edger never spoke in council, never had a thing to say. Edger did his talking with Mazian in private, sharing counsels, the power at the side of the throne, as it were. She had long suspected so. If there was any man in the room who really knew Mazian's mind, it was Edger. The only station but Saul. So they were three who knew, she reckoned glumly, and kept her mouth shut on it. They had come a long way, from company fleet to this. It was going to be a vast surprise to those company bastards on Earth and Sol Station, having a war brought to their doorstep, having Earth taken as Pell had been. And 7 carriers could do it, against a world which had given up starflight, which had, like Pell, only short haulers and a few in-system fighters at its command, with Union coming in on their heels. It was a glass house, Earth. It could not fight and win. She lost no sleep over it, did not plan to. More and more she was convinced that the whole Pell operation was busy work, that Mazian might be doing precisely what she had advised all along, keeping the troops busy, keeping even his crews and captains busy. Keeping even his crews and captains busy, while the real operation here was that on Downbelow. And what he proposed with the mines and short haulers, the gathering of supplies, the repairs, the sorting of station personnel for identification and capture of all those fugitives who might surface and make takeover easy and cheap for Union. Her job. Only here there were no merchanters to be pressed into duty as transport, and no carrier was going to let itself become a refugee ship. Could not. Had no room. It was no wonder that Mazian was not talking, was refusing to say anything about contingency plans which were, under numerous pretexts, already swinging into operation. A scenario constructed itself. Station comp blown, for they had all the new comp keys. Downbelow base thrown into chaos by the elimination of the one man who was holding it together, and the execution of all those gathered multitudes of humans and downers so that downers would never work for humans again. The station itself thrown into descending orbit, and themselves running for a jump point with a screen of short haulers that could only serve as navigation hazards. Jump for the hinder stars, and in quick succession for Saul itself. While Union had to decide whether to save itself a station full of people and a base, and to battle the chaos on Downbelow which could starve the station out even with rescue. Or to let Pell die and go for a strike unencumbered, having no base behind them closer than Viking. A vast, vast distance to Earth. Bastard, she hailed Mazian privately, with a glance under her brows. It was typical of Mazian that he worked moves ahead of the opposition and thought the unthinkable. He was the best. He always had been. She smiled at him when he fed them dry, precise orders about cataloguing, and had the satisfaction of seeing the great Mazian for a moment lose the thread of his thought. He recovered it, and went on, looked at her from time to time with perplexity, and then with greater warmth. So now assuredly they were three who knew. So, quick summary. Mazian appears to be planning subversively to attack and take Earth, which is incidentally the place that sent him and initially had him go and do all the things he's doing. Also, to possibly lure Union into attacking them there, which they might be able to win. Although it would still always be temporary, and then you've got to get Earth on side, and who knows if they what they'll do, because they people on Earth just don't get it. They've lived in a bubble, so to speak, with a Earthian attitude, a terrestrial, planet-bound attitude for too long, so they don't really understand how things have changed. "I'll be frank with you," she said to the men and women who assembled kneeling and standing in the lower deck suiting rooms, the only place on Norway she could get most of the troops assembled with an unobstructed view, jammed shoulder to shoulder as they were. "They're not happy with us. Mazian himself isn't happy with the way I've run this ship. Seems none of you is on the list. Seems none of us is involved with the market. Seems other crews are upset with you and me, and there are rumors flying about tampering with the list. About a deliberate tip-off due to some black market rivalry between Norway and other ships. Quiet! So I'm giving orders from the top. You get liberties on that same schedule and on the same terms as other troops. You get duty on their schedule too. I'm not going to comment except to compliment you on doing an excellent job, and to tell you two more things. I felt complimented on behalf of this whole ship that there was not a Norway name involved in that blue section mess. Second, I ask you to avoid argument with other units, whatever rumors are passed and however you're provoked. Apparently there is some hard feeling for which I take personal responsibility. Apparently, well, leave that unsaid. Questions?" There was deathly silence. No one moved. "I'll trust you'll pass the news to the incoming watch before I get the chance to do it in person. My apologies, my personal apologies, for what is apparently construed by others as unfairness to the people under my command. Dismissed." Still no one moved. She turned on her heel, walked away toward the lift, for the main level and her own quarters. "Ventum!" a voice muttered audibly in her wake. She stopped dead, with her back to them. "Norway!" someone shouted, and another, "Signy!" In a moment the whole ship echoed. She started walking again for the open lift, drew a deep breath of satisfaction for all the casual swing to her step. Vent him indeed, if even Conrad Mazian thought he could put his hand to Norway. She had started with the troops. Di Jans would have something to say to them, too. What threatened Norway's morale threatened lives, threatened the reflexes they had built up over years. And her pride. That, too. Her face was still burning as she strode into the lift and pushed the button. The shouts echoing in the corridors were salve for her pride, which was, she admitted to herself, as vast as Mazian's. Follow orders indeed. But she had calculated the effect on the troops and on her crew, and no one gave her orders regarding what happened within Norway itself. Not even Mazian. Clear and present trouble in paradise, as it were. Chapter 2, Part 1. Pell, Sector Green 9, January 6th, 2353. I'm pretty sure it's the year 2353. Give me a moment. I've checked this before and forgotten. Yes, 2353. It was 2352. Because it's just listed 1/6/53. Strictly speaking, that's how I should be reading it. Doesn't matter. The Downer was with him again, a small brown shadow, not altogether unusual in the traffic in 9. Josh paused in the riot-scarred corridor, put his foot on a molding, pretended to adjust the top of his boot. The Downer touched his arm, wrinkled its nose in bending and peering up at his face.
Konstantin, man, all right?
All right, he said. It was the one called Bluetooth, who was on their heels almost daily, managing to carry messages to and from Damon's mother. We've got a good place to hide now. No more trouble. Damon's safe and the man's making no more trouble. The furred, powerful hand sought his, forced an object into it.
You take, Konstantin, man? She give, say need.
The Downer slipped away in the traffic as quickly as he had come. Josh straightened, resisting the temptation to look about or to look at the metal object until he was some distance down the corridor. It turned out to be a brooch, metal that might be real gold. He pocketed it for the treasure it was to them, something saleable on the market, something that needed no card, that would bribe someone unbribable by other means, like the owner of their current lodgings. Gold had uses other than jewelry. Rare metals were worth lives, the going rate. And the day was coming when it would take greater and greater persuasion to keep Damon hidden. A woman of vast good sense, Damon's mother. She had ears and eyes in every Downer who flitted harmlessly through the corridors, and she knew their desperation, offered still a refuge that Damon would not take, because he above all did not want the Downer system subject to search. The net was closing on them. The area of usable corridors grew less and less. A new system was being installed, new cards, and the sections the troops cleared stayed cleared. Those within a section when the troops sealed it were rounded up, checked against the wanted lists, and given new IDs. Most of them. Some vanished. Period. And the new card system hit the market harder and harder the nearer it got. The value of cards and papers plummeted, for they would be valid only until the changeover was complete, and people were already getting shy of the old ones. Now and again an alarm went off, silent somewhere in comp, and troops would come to some establishment and start trace procedure on someone they wanted, as if most of the people in as if most people in unsecure Okay. As if most of the people in unsecure sections were using their own cards. But the troops asked questions and checked IDs when they were roused, kept the areas open to their raids, kept the populace terrorized and suspicious of each. Uh, kept the populace terrorized and suspicious each of the other, and that served Mazian's purpose. It also gave them a livelihood. It was their stock in trade, his and Damon's, the purification of cards. It was their value within the system of the black market. A buyer wanted to check the worth of a stolen card. A new purchaser wanted to be sure that a card would not ring alarms in comp. Someone wanted the bank code number to get at assets. The bars and sleepovers in the docks did not match up faces and IDs, not at all. And Damon had the access numbers to do it. He had learned them too, so that they worked a partnership, and neither of them had to venture into the corridors on too regular a basis. They had it down to a science, using the Downer tunnels and even crossing through the section barriers. Bluetooth had shown them how, so that no single comp terminal would have a series of inquiries. They had never triggered an alarm, even though some of the cards had been dangerously hot. They were good. They had a trade. ironically of Mazian's creation, which fed and housed and hid them with all the protections the market could offer its valuable operators. He had at the moment a pocketful of cards, each of which he knew by value according to the level of clearance and how much was in the credit account. Nothing in the latter, in most instances. Families of missing persons had gotten wise very quickly, and Station Comp had taken to honoring family requests that an account be frozen from access by a particular number. So rumor ran, and it was probably true. Most cards now were trouble. He had a few usable ones on the lo- in the he had a few usable ones in the lot and a collection of code numbers. Cards which had belonged to single persons or independent accounts were the only ones still good. But there were omens of more rapid change. Much better. But there were omens of more rapid change. It was his imagination, perhaps, but the corridors on all levels of green seemed more crowded today. It might well be so. All those who dared not submit to ID and recarding had crowded persistently into smaller and smaller spaces. Green and white remained open sectors, but he personally had gotten nervous about white, not wanting to go into it longer than he must. Had heard no rumors himself, but there was something in the air, something that reckoned another area was about to go under seal, and white was likeliest. Green was the section with the big concourses, and the fewest troublesome bottlenecks where determined resistance could fight from room to room and hall to hall, if it came to fighting. He rather imagined another end for them, that when all the problems Mazian had on Pell were neatly herded into one last section, they would simply blow it, vent the section with doors wide open, and they would die without appeal and without a chance. A few crazed souls had gotten pressure suits, the hottest item on the black market, and hovered near them, armed and wild-eyed, hoping to survive against all logic. Most of them simply expected to die. There was a desperate atmosphere in all of green, while those who had finally reconciled themselves to capture voluntarily moved into white. Green and white grew stranger and stranger, with walls graffitied with bizarre slogans, some obscene, some religious, some pathetic. "We lived here," one said. That was all. All but a very few lights in the corridors had been broken out, so that everything was twilight, and Station no longer dimmed lights for main day alter-day shifts. It would have become dangerously dark. There were some side corridors where all the lights were out, and no one went into those lairs unless he belonged there, or was dragged screaming into them. There were gangs who fought each other for power. The weaker souls clung to them, paid them all their resources, not to be harmed, and perhaps to have the chance to harm others. Some of the gangs had started in queue. Some were Pell gangs which formed in defense and undertook other business ventures. He feared them indiscriminately, feared their unreasoning violence most of all. He had let his beard grow, let his hair grow, walked with a slouch and acquired as much dirt as possible, changed his face subtly with cosmetic. That commodity sold high on the market, too. If there was any comedy in this grim place, it was that most of these folk hereabouts were doing exactly the same thing, that the section was full of men and women who desperately did not want to be recognized, and who avoided each other's eyes in a perpetual flinching as they walked the halls. Some who swaggered and tried to threaten unless troops were at hand. More who flitted like downcast ghosts, scurrying along in evident hope no one would set a hue and cry after them. Perhaps he had changed so much in appearance that no one did recognize him. No one had yet pointed a finger at him or at Damon in public. There was some loyalty left on Pell, perhaps. Or their involvement with the market protected them, or others who knew them were just too frightened to start something. Some of the gangs were linked into the market. Occasional troopers walked in the halls, some back in 9-2, no less common than downers about their business. Green Dock was still open as far as the end of White Dock, and Africa and occasionally Atlantic or Pacific occupied the first two berths of Green, while the other ships berthed in Blue Dock, and troops came and went freely through the personnel access beside the section seals on that end of Green. Troops entered Green and White on liberty or on duty, mingling with the condemned, and the condemned knowing that all they had to do to escape was to go up to those troops or to the cleared area access doors and turn themselves in. Some did not believe that the Maziani would decompress the section simply because of that close and almost friendly association. Troopers shed their armor on liberty, walked about laughing and human, hung out in the bars, staked out a couple of establishments for themselves, it was true, but mingled in other bars, turned an occasional benevolent smile on the market. So much the easier to handle the victims until it came, Josh reckoned. They still had choices left, played the game with the troops, dodged and struggled, but all it took was a button pushed somewhere in Central, no personal contact, no watching faces as they died, all clinical and distant. He and Damon planned wild and futile schemes. Damon's brother was rumored to be alive. They talked of stowing away on one of the shuttles, taking one over, getting to Downbelow and into the bush. They had as likely a chance of stealing a shuttle from armed troops as they did of walking to Downbelow, but the planning occupied their minds and gave them hope. And more realistic, they could try to pass the seals into the cleared sections and chance the alarm-rigged access doors, regimented security, checkpoints at every corner, and card use at every move. That was the way of life over there. Mallory's doing. They had been checking it out.
Too many men with guns, was Bluetooth's warning. Cold they eyes.
Cold indeed. And meanwhile there was the market and there was Ngo's. He approached the bar along Green 9, not by the tunnel ways which led to the corridor outside Ngo's back door, for that was for emergencies, and Ngo had no love for anyone using the back way without cause. Wanted no one seen in the main room who had not come in by the front door, and wanted no access alarms going off in comp. Ngo's Ngo Ngo's was a place where the market flourished, and as such it tried to be cleaner than most, one of almost a score of bars and entertainment concessions along Green Dock and the Niner access, which had once thrived in the traffic of merchanters. A line of sleepovers and vid theaters and lounges and restaurants, and one anomalous chapel completing the row. Most of the bars were open. The theaters and the chapel and some of the sleepovers were burned out shells, but the bars functioned, most like Ngo's, as restaurants as well, the channels through which station still fed the population, and black market food augmented what the station was willing to supply. He cast cautious glances one way and the other as he approached the front and ever wide door of Ngo's, not obvious looks around, but a rhythm of walking and looking as a man might who was simply making up his mind which bar he wanted. A face caught his eye, abruptly, heart-stoppingly. He delayed a half-beat and looked toward Mascari's, across the corridor at the emptying of 9 onto the docks. A tall man who had been standing there suddenly moved and darted within Mascari's. Dark obscured his vision, a flash of memory so vivid he staggered and forgot all his pattern. He was vulnerable for that instant, panicked. Turned for Ngo's doorway blindly and went inside, into the dim light and pounding music and the smells of alcohol and food and the unwashed clientele. The old man himself was tending bar. Josh went to the counter and leaned there, asked for a bottle. Ngo gave it to him, not asking for his card. That all came later, in the back room. But his hand shook in taking the bottle, and Ngo's quick hand caught his wrist.
Trouble?
Close one, he lied. And perhaps not a lie. I got clear. Gang trouble. Don't worry, no one tracked me. Nothing official.
You better be sure.
No problem. Nerves. It's nerves.
He clutched the bottle and walked away toward the back, stopped a moment against the back doorway that led into the kitchen, and waited to be sure his exit was not observed. One of the Maziani, maybe. His heart still pounded from the encounter. Someone within Go's under surveillance. No, his imagination. The Maziani did not need to be so subtle. He unstopped the bottle and drank from it. Downer wine, a cheap tranquilizer. He took a second long drink and began to feel better. He experienced such flashes not often. They were always bad. Anything could trigger it, usually some small and silly thing. A smell, a sound, a momentary wrong way of looking at a familiar thing or ordinary person. That it should have happened in public, that most disturbed him. It could have attracted notice. Maybe it had. He resolved not to go out again today. Was not sure about tomorrow. He took a third drink and a last look over the patrons at the dozen tables, then slipped back into the kitchen, where Ngo's wife and son were cooking up the orders. He paid them a casual glance, received sullen stares in return, and walked on through to the storeroom. He pushed the door open on manual. "Damon," he said, and the curtain at the rear of the cabinets opened. Damon came out and sat down among the canisters they used for furniture, in the light of the batteried lamp they used to escape Comp's watchful economy and infallible memory. He came and sank down wearily, gave Damon the bottle, and Damon took a drink. Unshaven, both of them, with the look of the unwashed, depressed crowds which collected down here.
"You're late," Damon said. "You trying to give me ulcers?"
He fished the cards out of his pocket, arranged them by memory, made quick notes with a grease pencil before he should forget. Damon gave him paper, and he wrote the details for each one, and Damon did not talk to him the while. Then it was done. His memory spilled, and he laid the batch on top of the next canister and reached for the wine bottle. He drank and set it down.
Met Bluetooth. Said your mother's fine. Gave you this.
He drew the brooch from his pocket and watched as Damon took it into his hands with that melancholy look that told him it might have some meaning beyond the gold itself. Damon nodded glumly and pocketed it. He did not much speak of his family, living or dead, not in reminiscence.
She knows, Damon said. She knows what it's coming to. She can see it from her vid screens, hear it from the downers. Did Bluetooth say anything Oh, that's Damon shit.
"She knows," Damon said. "She knows what it's coming to. She can see it from her vid screens, hear it from the downers. Did Bluetooth say anything specific?"
Only that your mother thought we needed it.
"No word of my brother?"
It didn't come up. We weren't in a place we could talk, so the downer and I.
Damon nodded, drew a deep breath, and leaned his elbows on his knees. Head bowed. Damon lived for such news. When it failed him, his spirits fell, and it hurt. Hurt both of them. He felt as if he had just dealt a wound. He felt as if he had dealt the wound.
I'm getting tight out there, Josh said. Lots of anxiety.
Jesus Christ. It's getting tight out there. It's getting tight out there, Josh said.
Lots of anxiety. I delayed a little along the way, listening, but no news. Everyone's scared, but no one knows anything.
Damon lifted his head, took the bottle, drank down half the remaining wine, hardly a swallow.
"Whatever we're going to do, we've got to do soon. Either go to the secured sections or try for the shuttle. We can't go on here."
Or make ourselves a bubble in the tunnels, he said.
In his reckoning, it was the only realistic idea. Most humans were pathologically frightened of the tunnels. What few humans who would try them What few humans who would try them, maybe they could fight them off. They had the guns. might be able to live there. But they were about out of time for any choices. It was not an existence to look forward to. And maybe we'll be lucky, he thought miserably, looking at Damon, who looked at the floor, lost in his own thoughts. Maybe they'll just blow the area. The storeroom door opened. Ngo came in on them, walked up and gathered up the cards, read through the notation, pursed his wrinkled mouth and frowned. You're sure? No mistakes. Ngo muttered unhappily at the quality of the merchandise, as if they were at fault, started to leave. Ngo, Damon said. Heard a rumor the market's going for the new paper. That so?
Where did you hear that?
Damon shrugged. Two men talking in front. That true, Ngo?
They're dreaming. You see a way to get your hands on the new system, you tell me. You see a way to get your hands into the new system, you tell me.
I'm thinking on it. Ngo muttered to himself and left. That so? Josh asked. Damon shook his head. Thought I might jar something loose. Ngo won't shake or there's no way anyone knows. I'd bet on the latter. So would I. Damon set his hands on his knees, sighed, looked up. Why don't we go out and get something to eat? No one out there who's trouble, is there? The memory which had left him came back with dark force. He opened his mouth to say something, and of a sudden came a rumbling which shook the floor, a boom and crash which overrode screams from outside. The seals! Damon exclaimed, on his feet. Cries continued, wild screams, chairs overturning in the front room. Damon rushed for the storeroom door, and Josh ran with him, out as far as the back door, where Ngo and his wife and son had scrambled to get out, Ngo with his market records in hand. No! Josh exclaimed. Wait! That would have been the doors to White. We're sealed. But there were troops up at 9, too. They wouldn't have troops in here if they were going to push the button. Come! Ngo's wife exclaimed. There was an announcement coming through the vid unit in the front room. They rushed in that direction, into the restaurant area, where a handful of people were clustered about the vid and a looter was busy gathering an armful of bottles from the bar.
Hey!
Ngo shouted in outrage, and the man snatched two more and ran. It was John Lukas on the screen. It always was when Mazian had an official announcement to station. The man had become a skeleton, a pitiable, shadow-eyed skeleton.
Been sealed off, Lukas was saying. White area residents and others who wish to leave will be permitted to leave. Go to the green dock access and you will be permitted to pass. They're herding all the undesirables in here,
Ngo said. Sweat stood out on his wrinkled face.
What about us who work here, Mr. Station Master Lukas? What about us honest people caught in here?
Lukas repeated all the announcement. It was probably a recording. Doubtful if they ever let the man on live. Come on, Damon said, hooking Josh's arm. They walked out the front door and around the corner onto Green Dock, walked far along the upward curve, where a great mass of people had gathered looking toward White. They were not the only ones. There were troops moving out along the far side wall, by the berths and gantries. Going to be shooting, Josh muttered. Damon, let's get out of here. Look at the doors. Look at the doors. He did look. The massive valves were tightly joined. The personnel access at the side was not open. It did not open. They're not going to let them through, Damon said. It was a lie, to get the fugitives to the docks over there. Let's get back, Josh pleaded with him. Someone fired. Their side, the troops. A barrage came over their heads and into the shop fronts. People shrieked and shoved, and they fled with it, down the dock, into 9, into Ngo's doorway, while riot surged past and down the hall. A few others tried to follow them, but Ngo rushed up with a stick and fended them off, all the while shrieking curses at the two of them for running in with trouble after them. They got the door closed, but the crowd outside was more interested in running, the path of least resistance. The room lights came on full, on a room full of tangled chairs and spilled dishes. In silence, Ngo and his family began cleaning up. Yeah, Ngo said to Josh, and thrust a wet, stew-soiled rag at him. Ngo turned a second frowning look on Damon, although he did not order. A Konstantin still had some privilege. But Damon started picking up dishes and straightening chairs and mopping with the rest of them. It grew quiet outside again, with an occasional pounding at the door. Faces stared at them through the plastic window, people simply wanting in, exhausted and frightened people, wanting the service of the place. Ngo opened the doors, cursed and shouted, let them in, set himself behind the bar, and started doling out drinks with no regard to credit for the moment. You pay, he warned all and sundry. Just sit down and we'll make out the tickets. Some left without paying. Some did sit down. Damon took a bottle of wine and drew Josh to a table in the farthest corner, where there was a short L. It was their usual place, which had a view of the front door and unobstructed access to the kitchen and their hiding places. The calm music channel had come on again. The calm music channel had come on again, playing something wistfully soothing and romantic. Josh leaned his head against his hands and wished he dared be drunk. He could not be. There were the dreams. Damon drank. Eventually it seemed to be enough, for Damon's shadowed eyes had an anesthetized haze which he envied. I'm going out tomorrow, Damon said. I've sat in that hole enough. I'm going out, maybe talk to a few people, try and make some contacts. There's got to be someone who hasn't cleared out of Green, someone who still owes my family some favors. He had tried before. We'll talk about it, Josh said. Ngo's son served them dinner, stew, stretched as far as possible. Josh sipped a spoonful of it, nudged Damon with his foot when he sat there. Damon gathered up his spoon and ate, but his mind still seemed elsewhere. Eileen, perhaps. Damon spoke her name sometimes in his sleep, sometimes his brother's. Or maybe he was thinking of other things, lost friends, people probably dead. He was not going to talk. Josh knew that. They spent long hours in silences, in their separate pasts. He thought of his own happier dreams, pleasant places, a sunlit road, dusty grain fields on Cytine, people who had loved him, faces that he had known, old friends, old comrades, far from this place. The hours were filled with it, the long, solitary hours each of them spent in hiding, the nights, with music from Ngo's front room jarring the walls most of the hours of main day and altar day, numbing, constant, or saccharine and pervasive. They stole sleep in the quiet times, lay listlessly in others. He did not intrude on Damon's fancies, nor Damon on his, never denied the importance of them, which were the best comfort they had in this place. One thing they no longer considered, and that was either of them turning himself in. They had Lukas's face before them, that death's head forewarning of Mazian's dealing with his puppets. If Emilio Konstantin was still alive as rumor said, privately Josh wondered if it was good news or bad. And that, too, he did not say. I hear, Damon said finally, that maybe some of the Maziani crew are on the take. I wonder if they could be bribed for more than goods, if there are holes in their new system. That's crazy. It's not in their interests. It's not a sack of flour you're talking about. Ask that kind of question and we'll have them on us. Probably you're right. Josh pushed the bowl back and stared at the rim of it. They were running out of time, that was all. In the sealing of white, they were sealed too. All it took now was a sweep starting from the dock or from Green 1, checking in those who were willing to surrender, shooting down those who were not. When they had white in order, it came. And it was beginning over there, was already underway. I'd have to make the approach to the fleet. Josh said finally. The troops would more likely recognize you than me. As long as I stay away from Norway troops. Damon was silent a moment, perhaps weighing odds. Let me try another thing. Let me think about it. There's got to be a way onto the shuttles. I'm going to check out the dock crews, find out who's working there. It was not going to work. It had always been a mad idea. Part 2. Merchanter Finity's End. Deep Space. January 6, 2353. Another merchanter in. Arrivals were not unusual. Eileen heard the report and got up from her couch, walked Finity's narrow spaces to see what Wes Nyhart had on scan.
What's the deal here?
A thin voice asked in due time. The freighter had jumped in at a respectful distance, fully cautious. It would take her a while to work her way in out of the jump range. Eileen sat down at the second seat at the scan, feeling after the cushion. Her thickening body vexed her subconsciously. It was a nuisance she had learned to live with. The baby was kicking, an internal and unpredictable companionship. Quiet, she thought at him, winced and concentrated on scan. Other Nyharts moved in to see.
Someone going to answer me?
The newcomer asked, much closer now. Give me ID, said the voice of another ship. This is Little Bear, merchanter. Who are you?
Keep coming. Just give us ID.
The answer time passed, still shorter now, and other merchanters had started to move. There was a gathering bunch of observers on Finity's bridge. Don't like this one, someone muttered.
This is Genevieve out of Unionside from Fargon. Rumor has it we've got something going on here. What's the situation? Let me take it.
Another voice broke in.
Genevieve, this is Pixie 2. Let me talk to the old man, all right, young fella?
There was a silence beyond what should have been. Eileen's heart started pumping overtime, and she swung about with an awkward and frantic wave at Nyhart, but the general alert was already on its way, Nyhart passing the signal to his nephew at Comp.
This is Sam Denton on Genevieve,
The voice returned.
Sam, what's my name? Soldiers here!
Genevieve sputtered, and the voice went off very quickly. Eileen reached frantically after Com as communications everywhere crackled orders to stand or be fired on. Genevieve, this is Quen of Estelle. Answer. No one fired. On scan, ships, the hundreds of ships drifting within the null point range, sat reoriented to embrace the intruder.
This is Union Lieutenant Marn Oborsk.
A voice returned at last.
Aboard Genevieve. This ship will destruct before capture. The Dentons are aboard. Confirm your identity. The Quens are dead. Estelle is a dead ship. What ship are you?
Genevieve, you are not in a position to make demands. Put the Dentons off their ship. Again a long pause.
I want to know who I'm talking to.
She let the silence ride for a moment. About her there was frantic activity on the bridge. Guns were being aimed, the relative positions calculated for speed, drift, and the probable sly use of docking jets to increase it. This is Quen speaking. We demand you set the Dentons off that ship. We tell you this, that if Union sets its hands on another merchanter, there's going to be the devil let loose. That the port of origin of any ship attacking or appropriating a merchanter vessel will be subject to the full sanctions of our alliance. That's the name of what's going on out here. Look your fill, Lieutenant Oborsk. We're spreading. We outnumber your warships. If you want a kilo of commerce moved anywhere, from now you deal with us.
What ship is speaking?
They might have started shooting instead of talking. Calm them down. Keep them steady. She wiped her face and rolled a glance at Neihart, who nodded. They had them calmed. Quen is all you need to know, Lieutenant. You're far outnumbered. How did you find this place? Did you get it out of the Dentons? Or did just the wrong ship contact you? I'll tell you this. The Merchanters' Alliance will deal as a unit. And if you want real trouble, sir, you go lay hands on another merchanter vessel. You and Mazian's fleet can do what you like to each other. We're not company and we're not union. We're the third side in this triangle, and from now on we negotiate in our own name.
What is in progress here?
Are you able to negotiate or carry messages on your side? There was a long delay. Lieutenant, she pursued, when authorized negotiators are willing to approach us, when authorized negotiators are willing to approach us, we are fully prepared to talk with you. In the meantime, kindly put the Dentons off. If you are willing to talk reasonably, you'll find us amiable. If, on the other hand, harm comes to any merchanter, reprisals will be made for it. And that is a promise. There was the requisite silence.
This is Sam Denton, another voice said finally. I'm instructed to tell you that this ship is going to put about and there is a destruct aboard. Got the whole family on here, Quen. That's truth, too.
Of a sudden, there was breakup. She flashed a look at vid and telemetry, saw the flare registered, suddenly grow, become a wash there was no mistaking even on vid. Her stomach tightened, and the baby moved. She put her hand on the spot and stared at the screens in a moment of nausea, while static kept coming in. A hand descended on her shoulder, Neihart's. Who fired? She asked.
This is Pixie 2. This is Pixie 2.
A voice came back, rough and thick.
I did. They were nosing zenith toward the gap. Engines flared. They'd have carried out too much.
We copy, Pixie. Going in. Another ship sent. Going to search the area. There was at least the possibility of a capsule. That Union might have allowed the Denton children to shelter there for safety. There was not much chance that a capsule could have survived that. Like Estelle, at Mariner. Like that. They were not going to find anything. Other blips were showing up, ghostly presences in the sunless dark of the point, defined only as blips on scan, or by the sometime flick of running lights, or shadow on vid, occulting stars. They were friendly. Hundreds of ships moving into the search area. We're in it now, Neihart murmured. Union won't rest. But they all knew that, from the time the word had gone out, from the time merchanters had begun to pass to merchanters the word, where to come, and the name that summoned them. A dead ship, and a dead name. From a disaster they all knew. Inevitable that Union get wind of it. By now, Union was surely noticing the curious absence of ships from their stations, merchanters who did not come in on schedule. They were panicking, perhaps, perceiving disappearances in zones where it could not be military action, with Mazian tied up at Pell. Union had appropriated ships. They had proven that. And before this ship came, it might have given its course to others. The next step was a warship sent in here, if Union could spare one from Pell. And the word had not sped only to Union space. It had gone to Sol. For Winifred had recalled her earthly ties, dumped her cargo, ridding herself of mass to jump as far as possible, had undertaken that long and uncertain journey to what welcome they did not know. Tell them about Marina, Eileen had asked of them, and Russell's, and Viking, and Pell. Make them understand. They did it dutifully, because they had once been Earth's. But it was gesture only. There was no answer coming. They did not find a capsule, only debris and wreckage. Part 3. Downbelow, Hisa Sanctuary, January 6, 2353. Local night. The Hisa had been coming and going from the beginning, quiet migration in and out of the gathering at the foot of the images, hushed and sober movement, by ones and twos and reverently, in respect to the dreamers who gathered there by the thousands. By day and by night they had come, carrying food and water, doing small and necessary things. There were domes for humans now, diggings made by downer labor, and compressors thumped away with the pulse of life, rude, patched domes, unlovely, but they gave shelter to the old and to the children, and to all the rest of them as brief summer yielded to fall, as skies clouded and the days full of sun and the nights full of stars grew fewer. Ships overflew them, shuttles on their runs going and coming. They were accustomed to this, and it no longer frightened them. "You must not gather even in the woods," Milico had explained to the old ones through interpreters. "Their eyes see warm things even through trees. Deep earth can hide, Hisa, oh, very deep. But they see even when sun doesn't shine." Downer eyes had gotten very round at that. They had talked among themselves. "Lukas's," they had muttered. But they had seemed to understand. She had talked day upon day to the old ones, talked until she was hoarse and she exhausted her interpreters, tried to make them understand what they faced, and when she would tire, alien hands would pat her arms and her face, and round Hisa eyes look at her with profound tenderness, all, sometimes, that they could do. And humans. By night she came to them. There was Ito and Ernst and others who grew moodier and moodier. Ito, because all the other officers had gone with Emilio, and Ernst, a small man who had not been chosen, and one of the strongest men of all the camps, Ned Cox, who had not volunteered in the first place, and began to be ashamed. There was a kind of contagion that spread among them, shame perhaps, when they heard news from main base that told of nothing but misery. About 100 sat outside the domes, choosing the cold weather and the reliance on breathers as if by rejecting comfort they proved something to each other and to themselves. They had grown silent, and their eyes were, as the Downers said, bright and cold. Day and night. In this sanctuary, in the place of Hisa images, they sat in front of the domes in which others lived, in which others were all too eager to take their turns. They could not all get in at once. They stayed because they must. Any desertion would be noted from the sky. They had elected sanctuary, and there was nothing left to do but to sit and think of the others. Thinking, measuring themselves. Dreaming, the Hisa called it. It was what Hisa came to do. Use sense, Milico had told them in the first days, when they were most restless, talking wildly about action. We're to wait. Wait on what? Cox had asked, and that began to haunt her own dreams. This night, Hisa were coming down the slope who had been sent for days before. This night she sat with the others and watched them come, hands in her lap, watched small distant bodies moving in the starless dark of the plain, sat with a curious tautness in her gut and a tightness in her throat. Hisa, to fill up the number of humans so that those who scanned the camp would find it undiminished. She carried the gun in a waterproof pocket, dressed warmly, still shivered in the uncertainty of things. Care for the Hisa, that was what she was left to do. But go, the Hisa themselves had told her. Your heart hurt, you eyes cold like they. Go, or lose the people she commanded. She could no longer hold them otherwise. Are you afraid to be left? She had asked the humans who would remain, the quiet, retiring ones, the old, the children, those men and women unlike those who sat outside, families and people with loved ones, and those who were, perhaps, saner. She felt guilt for them. She was supposed to protect them, and she could not really even lead that band outside. She simply ran ahead of their madness. Many of these who would remain were Q, refugees who had seen too much of horror and were too tired and had never asked to be down here at all. She imagined they must be afraid. The Hisa elders could be perversely strange, and while Pell folk were used to Hisa, they were still alien to these people. "No," one old woman had said, "for the first time since Mariner, I'm not afraid. We're safe here. Not from the guns, maybe, but from being afraid." And other heads had nodded, and eyes stared at her with the patience of the Hisa images. Now Hisa moved near them where they sat, a small group of Hisa, who came first to her and to Ito, and they stood up, looked back on the others who waited. "See you," Miliko said, and heads nodded in silence. Several more were chosen, the Hisa taking those they would, and slowly, in the dark, they walked that track across and up the slope, as others would come down in small groups. 123 humans would go this night, and as many Hisa come to join the camp in their place. She hoped that the Hisa understood. They had seemed to, finally, eyes lighting with merriment at the joke on the humans who looked down to spy on them. They went by the quickest route, past other Hisa on the way down, who called out cheerfully to them, and she walked at a human's best pace, panting, dizzy, resolved not to rest, for a Hisa would not rest. And so they had all agreed to it. And so they had whoa. And so they had all agreed to do it. She staggered as they made the final climb into the forest margin, helped by the young Hisa females who hovered about them. She Walks Far was one, and Wind in Trees another, and more whose names she could not quite fathom, nor the Hisa say. Quickfoot she had named the one, and Whisper the other, for they set great store by human names. She had tried the names they called themselves, to please them as they walked, but her tongue could not master them, and her attempts sent the Hisa into nose-wrinkling gales of laughter. They rested until the sun came up, in the trees and the bracken, and under a rocky ledge. By daylight they set out again, she and Ito and Ernst and the Hisa who guided them, as other Hisa had led others of them into the forest now, elsewhere. The Hisa moved as if there were no enemies in all the world, with prank playing, and once an ambush which stopped their hearts. Quickfoot's joke. Miliko frowned, and when other humans did, the Hisa caught the mood and grew quieter, seeming perplexed. Miliko caught Whisper by the hand and tried earnestly and once more to make sense to her, who knew less human speech than those Hisa they were accustomed to deal with. "Look!" At last she grew desperate, seized a stick and crouched down, ripped up living and dead bracken to make a clear spot. She jabbed the stick at the ground. "Konstantin man camp." She drew a line. "River." It was not likely, knowledgeable men said, that any drawn symbol was going to penetrate Hisa imagination. It was not in their approach to things, lines and marks bearing no relationship to the real object. "We make circle so we eyes watch human camp. See Konstantin, see bounder." Oh, that's still her. "We make circle so we eyes watch human camp. See Konstantin, see bounder." Whisper nodded, suddenly enthusiastic, a quick bob of her whole body on her haunches. She pointed back in the direction of the plain. "They, they, they," she said, and snatched the stick, waved it at the sky with the nearest thing to menace she had ever seen in a Hisa. "Bad, they," she said, and hurled the stick at the sky, bounced several times, clapped her hands and struck her breast with her palms. "I friend Bounder." Bounder's mate. Miliko stared at the young female's intense expression, suddenly understanding, and Whisper seized her hand, patted it. Quickfoot patted her shoulder. There was a quick sputtering of conversation among all the Hisa, and they suddenly seemed to take a decision, separated by pairs, and each seized a human by the hand. Miliko, Ito protested. Trust them. Let's go with it. Hisa won't get lost. They'll keep us in touch and get us back again when we have to. I'll send a message to you. Wait on it. The Hisa were anxiously urging them apart, each a separate way. Take care, Ernst said, looking back. Ernst said, looking back, and trees came between. She, Ernst, and Ito had guns, half the guns there were on all of Downbelow, except the troops and the other three were coming. 6 guns and a little of the blasting materials for moving stumps. That was their whole arsenal. Go quietly, no more than 3 together, she had urged the Hisa constantly, trying to keep their movements ordinary in human scan. And by threes the Hisa had taken them, by their curious logic. She and Whisper and Quickfoot, 3 humans and 6 Hisa, and now 3 units of 3 headed apart in haste. No more pranks. Suddenly Quickfoot and Whisper were very serious indeed, slipping through the brush, turning this time to caution her when she made what their sensitive ears thought too much noise. The hiss of the breather she could not help. Oh, that's right. She's been wearing a breather the whole time. Whatever. We're not going to reread the whole chapter. No more pranks. We did that. The hiss of the breather she could not help, but she took care to break no branch, imitating the Hisa's own gliding steps, their stop and start swiftness, as if, the thought reached her finally, as if they were teaching her. She rested when she must, and only then. Once fell, hard, from walking too long, and the Hisa scrambled to pick her up and to pat her face and stroke her hair. They held her as they did each other, tucked her up with their warmth, for the sky was clouding, and the wind was chill. It started to rain. She rose as soon as she could, insisted on their pace. Good, good, they said. You good. And by afternoon more met them, more females and 2 males. There was no sign of them one moment, and then they came from a little hill within the woods, and from out of the trees, and leaves like brown shadows in the misting rain, the water beading like jewels on their pelts. Whisper and Quickfoot spoke to them, their arms about her, and had an answer. Say, far walk they place. Here, come, many come. They eyes warm see you, Mihan Tisar. There were 12 of them. One by one they came and touched Miliko's hands and hugged her, and bobbed and bowed in solemn courtesy. What Whisper said was long, and drew long answers from one and the other. They see, Quickfoot said, listening while Whisper talked. They see human place. Hisa there hurt, human hurt.
We've got to go there, Miliko said, touching her heart. All my humans go there, sit on hills, watch. You understand? Hear good?
Here, Quickfoot said, and seemed to translate. The others started walking, leading the way, and what they should do. Oh, sorry. And what they should all do when they got there she did not know. Ito's madness and that of the others frightened her. 6 pistols could not take a shuttle, nor the rest of them when they should come. Unarmed and by no means able to go against heavy-armed troops, they could only watch, and be there, and hope. They walked throughout the day, with rain sifting cold through the leaves, and the wind shaking drops down on them when it was not actually raining. Streams were up, bubbling freely. They passed into wilder and wilder thicket.
Human place,
She reminded them finally, despairing.
We have to go to the human camp.
Go human place, Whisper confirmed, and in the next moment she was gone, slipping through the brush with such speed she tricked the eyes. Run good, Quickfoot assured her. Make bounder walk far, get she. Many he fall, she walk. Milico frowned, perplexed. As much of Hisa chatter was perplexing. Was perplexing. But Whisper was off about sober business, that much seemed likely, and she struggled to keep moving. At long last she saw a break in the trees, staggered toward it with the last of her strength, for there was smoke, the smoke of the mills, and soon after that she could make out the twilight glimmer of a dome. She sank to her knees at the edge of the woods, took a moment to realize where she was. She had never seen the camp from this angle before, high in the hills. She leaned there with Quickfoot patting her shoulder, for she was gasping. And her vision kept clouding. She felt after the 3 spare cylinders she had in her left pocket, and hoped she had not ruined the one in the mask. She had reckoned they could live out here for weeks. They could not be using them up like that. The sun was going. She saw the lights go on in the camp, and as she worked out on the edge of an eroded overhang, she could see figures moving out there under the lights, a burdened line toiling back and forth between the mill and the road. She come, Quickfoot told her suddenly. Milico looked back, suddenly missed the others, who had been behind them in the trees and now were nowhere in sight, blinked again as the brush parted, and Whisper dropped to her haunches, panting. Pounder, Whisper breathed, rocking with her breaths. He hurt work hard. Konstantin man hurt. Give you. She had a bit of paper clenched in her wet, furry fist. Milico took it, smoothed out the sodden scrap very carefully, with the drizzle soaking it afresh and making it fragile as tissue. She had to bend very close and angle it to read in the twilight. Crabbed words and twisted. It's pretty bad here. Won't pretend not. Stay out. Stay away. Please. I told you what to do. Scatter and keep out of their hands. Fear they maybe want more workers. I'm all right. Please. Go back. Stay out of trouble. The 2 Hisa looked at her, dark eyes perplexed. Marks on paper. It was confusing to them.
Did anyone see you? She asked. Man see you?
Whisper pursed her lips. Aye, Downer, she said scornfully. Many Downer come here. Carry sack, Downer. Bring mill, Downer. Bounder there, human see I, don't see. Who I? I, Downer. Bounder say you friend hurt work hard. Mans kill mans. He say love you.
Love him too.
She tucked the precious note within her jacket, crouched within the leaves with her hood pulled over her head, and her hand within her pocket on the butt of the pistol. There was no action they could take that might not make things worse, that might not mean the lives of everyone down there. Even if they could take one of the ships, it would only bring reprisals down on them. Massive strike. Here, back at the shrine. Lives for lives. Emilio worked down there to save Downbelow, to save what of it they could. And the last thing he wanted was some quixotic move from them.
Quickfoot, she said, you run, find Downers, find all humans with me, understand? Tell them, Milico talks with Konstantin, man. Tell all wait, make no trouble.
Quickfoot tried to repeat it, muddled, not knowing all the words. Quietly, patiently, Milico tried again, and finally Quickfoot bobbed assent. Tell they sit, Quickfoot said excitedly. You talk Konstantin, man.
Yes, she said, yes.
And Quickfoot fled. The Downers could come and go. Mazian's men did not, as Whisper said, see any difference in them, could not tell them apart. And that was the only hope they had, to keep communication between them, to let the men down there know that they were not alone. Emilio knew she was there. Maybe, for all he wished her elsewhere, that was some comfort. And that is where we will call it for today. A shorter one this week. A shorter one this week. Next week, let me put in a bookmark that gets to the end of chapter 3 of book 5. And we'll see. How long would the section be after that one? Ah, geez, super short either way, like 25 pages. Whatever, it's fine. It's fine. Next week's will be longer than this week's by a bit. I'd like to get through both, but next week's will be either very long or it'll be more normal sized. Anyway, that'll do it for today. I apologize that I wasn't here for Monday to read more of Lethal Heritage by Michael Stackpole. Next Monday should be fine, though. And this Friday, we will continue reading through more of Death's End by Shijin Liu. We are nearly halfway done. Next week, we will pass the halfway point. All right. Or this next installment will pass through the halfway point, I should say. Alrighty. That I think will do it. Nothing new or interesting to report. Stay safe, stay sane, be decent to